Welcome back, everyone, to Self Principle. As always, I'm Dr. Sean Hashmi. If this is your first time visiting the channel, Self is sleep, exercise, love, food. And on this channel, we make sure to bring you evidence-based information so that real science meets real health. Now, today's topic is the science of longevity. So we're going to talk about 7 habits that are evidence-based that have been shown in lots of different studies to help you live longer. So as you go through this is going to be a longer video. All of the sections are bookmarked. You can go to whichever habit that you want to learn about. And as always, all the references are there so you can look at them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you find this content helpful. So let's dive into the most powerful longevity habit, which is exercise. Now, if you were to ask me if there's only one thing you could do today to extend your life, to extend your health, I would say it's exercise. Now, that's not to discount the other habits, but exercise is literally the most important thing that we can do from the moment we're born all the way up until the moment we die. And one of the things about exercise is that it is one of the strongest predictors of a long and healthy life. In fact, the data is so convincing that when it comes to lowering the risk of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and even the dreaded D word, dementia, all of these things can be lowered simply by moving more. And if you're wondering, well, should I move more? Should I strength train? We're going to make sure that you get the data on both sides of the story. So let's start with cardiovascular exercise or aerobic training, or essentially just get up and move. So it doesn't really matter what you're going to do, running, swimming, cycling, HIIT training, brisk walking, you name it. The data is very convincing. From a longevity and lifespan perspective, what the data shows is regular aerobic exercise is associated with a 20 to 30% reduction in all-cause mortality. This is from Schroeder and colleagues from PLOS ONE back in 2019. When you start to get down to heart health, you'll see that it lowers blood pressure. In fact, you'll find that blood pressures can lower by as much as 5 points simply by doing more aerobic exercise. In fact, it doesn't just stop there. It also strengthens the heart. The left side of your heart, how well the heart squeezes, or the ejection fraction, actually improves. How much? 3.02%. This is from Zhang et al., PLOS ONE, 2018. Then we get to metabolic health. And what's fascinating about cardiovascular exercise is you start to improve the insulin resistance. In other words, you're gaining lots of ground back and getting that sensitivity to insulin back and reducing all of that inflammation that sort of hangs around. So therefore, you're lowering your risk of things like diabetes, metabolic disease. This is also from Schroeder and colleagues, 2019. So the $1 million question is, how much should I do? The bottom line there is get started. Now, we have all heard of things like 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio per week. Look, just get started. Try to make it a habit and do it as much as possible. At least aim for 150 minutes. But if you can do more, do more. And you'll hear things like 75 minutes a week of high intensity cardio. My girls are wrestlers. They're 7 and they're 12. Actually, my younger one just turned 8. So my daughters are 8 and 12. They end up training like 4 hours a day right now in wrestling. So everything is relative. Do the best you can. There's no comparison to you except for you. Then when we switch gears and we talk about resistance training, lots of data there too for strength training, because if you want to increase lifespan, nothing really comes close to lifting weights. Muscle is one of the best determinants of how soon you're going to die. So from a longevity perspective, resistance training has been shown to reduce all-cause mortality by 15%, cardiovascular mortality by 19%, and cancer mortality by 14%. This is from Schroeder and colleagues, 2019. From a muscle and bone health perspective, it can increase muscle strength by 18 to 19%, which therefore is going to offset all of us as we get older. We're going to lose muscle, we're going to lose bone. How cool is that you can increase your strength almost 20% simply by lifting some weights? And even things like bone density, you can reduce the risk of osteoporosis. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine 2017 study that showed that. And then from metabolic benefits, you'll see not only does your overall body fat go down, but you will also see your visceral body fat, the bad type of body fat. You'll see improvements in insulin sensitivity. You also see that your metabolic rate gets better simply because of having more muscle. And same question, how much should you do? If you can do 2 to 3 sessions of strength training a week, that is amazing. And as you're doing that, remember, focus on compound movements that hit multiple muscle groups. For example, squats. A lot of my patients come and tell me, Doc, I can't do squats. It's very simple. Can you sit down in a chair? Excellent. Can you stand up from a chair? Excellent. Now repeat that. You're just doing squats. Go slow. Don't fall off the chair. Don't make sure it has wheels, but go slowly. And then when it comes to getting the best of both worlds, why not combine cardio and strength training? So when you look at the data of combination, it shows that provides you the greatest improvement in physical function, the greatest reduction in you getting weak as you age. This is from the 2017 study. And if you look at arterial stiffness, combining cardio and strength training lowers arterial stiffness and improves cardiac output by 0.9 liters per minute. This is from Zhang and colleagues 2018. So in other words, just because strength is good, cardio is good, combining the two is even better. And same thing when it comes to body recomposition. If you're trying to lose fat, if you're trying to build lean muscle, doing a combination of both is the fastest way. And if you're wondering, how do I combine everything? 150 minutes of cardio, 2 to 3 times the strength training. It's that simple. But just remember, this is literally the number one longevity habit out there because it improves every aspect of your body, your heart, your brain, your kidneys, you name it, and it's going to get better from this. And if you're thinking about it, the answer is not cardio or strength training, it's cardio and strength training. And it doesn't matter how much you do. Stay consistent. Every little bit counts. All right, let's move on to habit number 2, which is sleep. Sleep is incredibly important to longevity and to health. So in other words, lifespan and health span are going to go up. And it turns out that too little or too much sleep can actually shorten your lifespan. So let's dive into the data. So when we start to think about sleep, it's so easy to overlook it when we talk about longevity. In fact, sleep quality and sleep regularity are just as important as sleep duration. In other words, how good is your sleep? Let's say you do sleep 7 hours, but you're tossing and turning the whole time. Or you sleep 7 hours, but you're going to bed at different times, waking up at different times. So quality, regularity are just as important as duration is. And that's why irregular sleep patterns, if you're sleep deprived, if you have sleep disorders, you got obstructive sleep apnea, all those things lead to faster risk of death. Now, let's dive into the data. Sleep duration and longevity. So how much sleep do you actually need? Well, it turns out that both short sleep, less than 6 hours, and long sleep, more than 9 hours, actually associated with increased mortality risk. And in some of the studies, this is for adults, in some of the studies, it actually talks about more than 8 hours is not necessarily a good thing. So this is from Wang and colleagues, 2024. References, once again, are on the bottom of the study. You can have those. There's a Mendelian randomization study that was done on the UK Biobank data, and they found same thing. Sleeping too little, sleeping too much was bad, but more specifically, either one of those was accelerating biological aging, making you get older. And the sweet spot was 7 to 8 hours a night. Now, sleep regularity. What's important to understand here is how consistent is your sleep schedule. So there's a study that was part of the MESA, or multi-ethnic study of atherosclerosis. They found that higher sleep scores based on regularity, quality, and duration resulted in 25% lower risk of death. How simple is that? Just tonight, if focusing on your sleep, you can lower your risk of dying by 25%. In fact, the study on sleep regularity found that if you have a consistent schedule, you can actually reduce your risk of all-cause mortality by 20 to 48%. This is a different study from 2024 as well. So in other words, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time is such a powerful way to ensure your long-term health. Now, if you have sleep disorders, they definitely make an impact. So if you have obstructive sleep apnea, if your partner tells you snore really loudly and sometimes you stop breathing for a few seconds, you need to get checked. And if you have it, please use the CPAP device that your doctor gives you because it does allow more air to get it. Best of all is if you lose weight because that will improve your sleep apnea. But if you have snoring, if you're gasping for air at night, if you got fatigue or feeling so tired, just remember, make sure you think about getting screened for sleep apnea because those are all telltale signs. And when we talk about things like getting ready for bed or sleep hygiene is a thing, very small changes can give you such great results. For example, the environment in which you sleep. Is the room cool? Is the room dark? Is the room quiet? Blackout curtains are great. Minimize blue light. All of us have our phones. Make sure that you stop looking at the phones. Don't use stimulants. In fact, don't have any caffeinated products at least 10 hours before bedtime. This will make a huge impact. Some of us are very slow metabolizers, so you would think that caffeine would be gone 4 to 6 hours, but especially as we get older, caffeine can last a lot longer. So try to stop at least 10 hours. The last 4 hours before you go to bed, try not to eat anything heavy because you won't get that deep, restful sleep. And remember, blue light and all these things, our melatonin production is already going down. If you do blue light, then you're going to actually make the melatonin production even worse, and you're not going to get that deep quality sleep. And then exercise is fascinating because exercise during the daytime will improve the quality and the duration of your sleep. And stress. I know when I'm stressed, I have a very hard time sleeping. And that's why for me, I use an app to be able to stretch and then to meditate. And it's been fantastic. It's a great stretching app, but I use it all the time specifically because of the fact that it helps me have habits and it helps me to calm my brain down. And then the flip side to all of the sleep hygiene is during the daytime, expose yourself to natural light so that day-night circadian rhythm starts to make sense. So once again, 7 to 8 hours is key. You want regularity. You want to make sure that you're going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. Duration is very, very important as well. If you're worried about sleep disorders, please get them checked out and work on that sleep hygiene. All right, let's go to longevity habit number 3, which is social connection, stress reduction, mindfulness. The reason this matters is loneliness. Loneliness. Forget smoking, alcohol, everything. Loneliness by itself can increase the risk of early death by as much as 57%. In fact, social connection, stress management, mindfulness, all of these have a profound effect on how you live. So let's take a look at the science. When we talk about social ties are such an important predictor of a long, healthy life. In fact, loneliness is linked to weakened immune system. It's linked to accelerated aging in the body. And so if you want to fight that, meditation, mindfulness, working on relationships. Look, if somebody has wronged you, forgive them. By forgiving them, you're actually forgiving yourself. You're allowing the healing to finally occur. You'll sleep better. You'll feel better. You'll do better. So things like forgiveness are such powerful things. And I'm saying this, and this is stuff I'm constantly working on. I don't have it figured out at all. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's worth it. Now, in terms of how important this stuff is, there's a meta-analysis of over 1,100 studies that found that strong social support was so important in terms of reducing the risk and extending the lifespan. In fact, one study in 2021 showed that, once again, persistent loneliness increased the risk of early death by 57%. And those who have strong social ties, their risk of heart disease, depression, brain decline all go down. In fact, if you look at the longest living populations in the world, the blue zones that we've talked about, they all prioritize deep, meaningful relationships. So if you're thinking about how powerful social connection is so incredibly powerful. There's a reason why we actually put it as item number 3 in our overall state. And then when we talk about things like stress. Stress is so interesting because from a physiological level, stress actually is linked to shorter telomeres. Remember, telomeres are those protective caps at the end of the DNA. They are sort of linked to aging. They're markers that we can use. And when you're talking about cortisol, which is the stress hormone, higher cortisol, the faster you're going to get telomere shortening. And then the end result of stress is heart disease, brain decline, immune system. All of these things go down. But if you want to flip it around, little bit of meditation, mindfulness has shown that it can be linked to longer telomere livers. So in other words, we're not saying that it's causative. It's a correlation. People who practice mindfulness, who practice loving kindness meditation, who learn to forgive others and forgive themselves, in general, their telomeres are longer. And so in other words, the thought process is it may actually help you to slow down biological aging. In fact, when you think about mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, we know that it can have a significant impact on telomere length and on your physical and psychological well-being. And all it takes is just a few minutes. Whether you got 1 minute, you got 3 minutes, doesn't matter. Just a few minutes is all you need. And so as you're thinking about all of this, just remember, these basic things happen. And if you're somebody who's got a partner, remember, having a happy partner is linked to 13% lower risk of death. I'm actually going to tell this to my wife so she knows this. But working on your relationship can actually lower stress, lower inflammation, and promote good health. And it turns out that emotional connections, they release oxytocin, which lowers stress and makes you feel good. And people who are in committed relationships, whatever your relationship is, whether you're married, not married, doesn't matter, but in committed relationships, they often have stronger support systems and they have less stress, and it turns out they tend to live longer. So how do you work this into your longevity hacks? Prioritize social engagement. Work can wait. Manage stress better. Meditate, spend time in nature, incorporate meditation, even 60 seconds. I do 3 minutes because I always like to do different things and it's hard for me to sit still. So my goal was 3 minutes, and the stretching app that I was referring to, that's what I do at the end, is 3 minutes every single time. Bottom line is social connection is such an important predictor of how long you're going to live. On the flip side, loneliness can be as harmful as smoking in some cases. All right, let's go to longevity habit number 4. Nuts. Nut consumption is such a simple thing. In fact, nuts, all kinds of nuts, they are nutritional powerhouses because they have all the good stuff. They got healthy fats, they got protein, they got fiber, they got vitamins, they got antioxidants. And what the data shows is eating more nuts is linked to lower risk of death from heart disease, from cancer, from respiratory diseases, and the list goes on and on. In fact, if you look at the data, there's a study from the New England Journal of Medicine, 2013. People who consumed nuts 7 or more times per week had a 20% lower risk of death than those who did not eat nuts. In fact, higher nut intake was once again in this particular study linked to lower risk of heart disease, cancer, and respiratory diseases. There's a systematic review and meta-analysis. This was published in 2015 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They found that each daily serving of nuts reduced all-cause mortality by 17%. Then there's a study in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, from 2015, and they looked at all sorts of diverse ethnic, socioeconomic groups and found the highest nut consumption had lower total mortality by 21. Once again, nuts are awesome because of the fact that they have all of these amazing things. They got antioxidants that reduce inflammation. They have healthy unsaturated fats and fiber that's good for heart. They have reduction in cancer because of the lowering of inflammation. They can help to manage blood sugars, weight, reducing diabetes risk. And if you're wondering how much to have, just a handful of nuts is plenty. Take a small handful and you're good to go. What kind of nuts? All kind of nuts. The only catch is try to get them unsalted. That's it. Don't get all the sugar and everything added to them. Just get them unsalted. Whether you choose raw or roasted, it doesn't matter. But nuts are awesome because of all the amazing benefits they have. Number 5 on our longevity habits is berries. Berry consumption is such a delicious pathway to longevity. Whether it's blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, doesn't matter. Berries are amazing, and the science is there to back it up. In fact, the science shows that because berries are packed with antioxidants, flavonoids, vitamins, all of these things protect your cells from aging. So they're awesome when it comes to thinking about longevity. What's the data? There's a study in the Journal of Nutrition. They found that higher intake of berries, strawberries, blueberries, etc., was linked to lower all-cause mortality. And it didn't matter what berries you consumed, but any berry consumption reduced the risk of death by 21%. In fact, blueberries and cranberries had the strongest effect. They reduced mortality by 21% for blueberries, 31% for cranberries. And the study found a clear dose-response relationship. In other words, the more berries you ate, the lower your risk of dying from anything. There's a different study, this is from 2015, in men who ate berries, fruits, vegetables more than 27 times per month, in other words, a serving every day, had a 8 to 10% reduced risk of death from all causes. And they also had a 20% reduction in stroke-related death. And then when you start to look at some studies in animals and species, you find that in model organisms, blueberry extracts can extend lifespan and enhance their resistance to stress. So what's fascinating in like C. elegans, these studies have been done, you can increase the lifespan of C. elegans simply by going ahead and giving them blueberry extract. Well, we can do the same thing. All you got to do is get a handful of blueberries and you're good. And then you start to talk about, well, what's the anti-aging effects of these things? There's lots of things being studied. Some of them are the anthocyanins that are in there. They're activating these quote unquote longevity related pathways, the FOXOs, etc. The data is there, and the data is so simple that berries, which can be easily had, they help the brain, they help the heart, they help the kidneys, they control your sugars, they lower the risk of cancer. How much to have? Have a serving a day. It doesn't matter if they're fresh. It doesn't matter if they're frozen. It doesn't matter what type of berries. Blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, cranberries. Have berries, period. All right, number 6. Number 6 is coffee and tea. When we start to think about coffee and tea, we've talked about this on this channel several times. You can watch some of the previous videos on it. But coffee and tea are amazing. They're loaded with antioxidants, anti-inflammatory compounds. They're good for just about every organ in the body, and they reduce the risk of death from so many things. So when you start to think about coffee, 2 to 3 cups per day is the optimal amount. And from an all-cause mortality perspective, 2 to 3 cups has the best outcomes for lowering your risk of death. And these benefits have been seen in all sorts of populations, from Asian populations to the UK Biobank looking at European populations. It's all there. Studies are cited for you from 2022, 2 different studies. From heart disease and cancer, you find that coffee drinkers have lower risk of cardiovascular disease, lower risk of cancer-specific mortality. And the dreaded dementia and stroke risk, 2 to 3 cups, has a lower risk of stroke and dementia. So bottom line here is, if you're starting to think about this, 2 to 3 cups is going to have the best bang for your buck. And this is for coffee and for tea. And it doesn't matter if you're thinking about green tea, and it doesn't matter if it's caffeinated or decaf. In fact, decaf in studies has shown to have the same impact. And in some cases, people might drink coffee and tea. And if you're doing that, there is a study from Chen and colleagues from 2022 that the combination of coffee and tea may actually have synergistic effects. In other words, you get better effects from a risk of death from all causes, heart disease, respiratory disease, when you combine them. And what's interesting about coffee and tea with lifestyle things is people who are non-smokers actually get benefits more with coffee and tea than people who are smokers. So if you are a smoker and you quit smoking and you like your coffee, go for it. You'll actually have much better benefits. If you're somebody who exercises, coffee and tea's benefits are much greater in people who exercise. Same thing, if you eat more of a whole food diet, you're going to find that the benefits of coffee and tea are greater. And with alcohol, remember, on this channel, what I've talked about is there's no safe drinking limit. And then finally, sleep. Folks who get good sleep, you'll find that in those cases, the sleep and coffee during regular hours earlier in the day actually can make a big overall difference in health. So 2 to 3 cups a day. Don't go crazy in terms of all of the sugar and everything else you're going to add. Just kind of be mindful. Make sure that you're stopping caffeine intake 10 hours before bedtime. And there you have it. Now, the final one. This is protein intake. So not only does the amount matter, but there's also some data that plant protein may actually be a little bit more beneficial than animal protein, but it really depends on what you're going after. So when we talk about protein, protein is so important: muscle, bone, overall health. And in terms of the type of protein, there's some very interesting data as well. So first, doesn't matter what type of protein, higher total protein is linked to longevity. In fact, higher total protein intake is linked to about a 6% lower risk of death from all causes. This is from a 2020 study. And once again, the references are there for you. When we start to look at plant proteins, for every additional 3% of your daily energy that you're getting from plant protein, you're getting about a 5% lower risk of death from all causes. In fact, if you're somebody who's older, each additional serving of plant protein per day, you have about a 25% lower risk of death from all causes. And what plant protein does, which is a little bit different from animal protein, is higher intake of plant protein is linked to slower biological aging and longer telomeres. Telomeres are very, very important when it comes to this. This is a study from 2024. With animal protein, just remember, the data is really talking about red meats and processed meats. There is no room for processed meats in our diet. Red meat is always tricky because when you look at the data, it's hard to take away all the other things the person may be doing. Higher animal protein intake overall from red and processed meats lumped together in the 2020 study from Chen and colleagues had a 9% higher risk of cardiovascular mortality. But they didn't separate out the red meat from the processed meat. And replacing red meat with plant-based proteins lowers risk by 13% for all-cause mortality. This is a 2016 and 2019 studies. Both of them showed that. So plant protein, why? For a longevity hack, lower risk of heart disease, cancer prevention, may actually be better for our metabolism. So now you have 7 habits to help you live longer. The big challenge is which one are you going to start with first? You don't have to do all 7. You can come back to this video time and time again, take a look at what works best for you. And as always, just remember, if you find these videos valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, if you could comment, if you can subscribe. It really helps the channel to grow. Thank you for spending this time with me. And I hope you take some of this advice to heart, especially about the concept of social connection, of forgiveness, of kindness, of gratitude. It's such a powerful concept. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of my journey, being a part of this channel, and I'll see you guys next time.